hear me at the back? I do have quite a quiet voice, so please wave if you can't hear me. I'm happy to shout. So welcome to my session. It's a really busy full room, which is lovely. My name is Anna, and my session is getting started with Azure OpenAI. So if you're in the wrong place, you're welcome to get up and run away now. But looks like you're all here to learn more about OpenAI. So who am I? This is a very busy slide. I've been in the industry for over 18 years, so quite some time. I'm a data engineering and AI consultant, but I was a C# developer for over a decade. So I am on your side. I developed code for a long time. They call me the Code Cops, which is a sticker on my laptop there, because I'm so on it when it comes to standards, testing, infrastructure as code, DevOps. They made the stickers up for me because I was nagging them so much to conform to those standards. So I have intensive software and data engineering experience. Started off as a software engineer and then essentially moved into data engineering and AI. I am a data platform and AI MVP. There's not that many of us that have got dual awards. I think it's just because I like standing on stage and organising events and just getting really excited about data that this year they gave me the dual award. I'm a public speaker and I'm a community organiser. So I'm involved with a few events. I've put some information on there. We've got Future Data Driven, which is happening next week. It's a completely online event based mainly around the Microsoft platform, but we've got some edge cases. It's everything data and AI, so it's worth checking out. I organise a monthly meetup called Data Bristol in the UK. I am a co-organiser, and we are always looking for new speakers. So if you are a speaker or if you're in the UK, you're always welcome to come along. And I also organise an online meetup with some other organisers called Cloud Data Driven. That again is data focused, or everything data and AI. It's every Thursday and worth checking out. I feel like a brownie here, all the things on my slide. I'm a Databricks solution architect champion. Basically, you pass exams and you have an interview and they give you a badge. So I get to be involved with a lot of that. My day job, a lot of it is Databricks at the moment, so I work closely with the Databricks US team, working with their kind of Silicon Valley big clients, basically at the moment moving terabytes, petabytes of data from old systems into Databricks so that it would then be ready for different engineering scenarios and obviously for AI as well. And as you can see, my slides are branded with Nuida. Nuida are a training company that I work closely with. So I help them put content together and deliver courses for them. So one of them recently was actually working with kind of Copilot and AI and helping them put a course together for their clients that they can give to them, that they can give to their employees that essentially want to pick up Copilot within Office 365. So Nuida are a training company. They offer a range of courses worth checking out. Just give me a shout afterwards if you are interested. So that's my sales pitch. Well, we're not here to hear about me. Why are we here? We want to learn more about working with OpenAI. And the point of this session is from a beginner's perspective. So if you are a C#.NET developer, how can you start picking up OpenAI and start working with it and using it in a productive way? I'm going to just grab a drink. So what are we going to cover in this session? So we're going to cover what exactly is OpenAI. We're going to look at some of the models, development tools, pricing, security, responsible AI, embeddings and RAG, and LLMOps. If I can get that word out. So firstly, what is OpenAI and what is Azure OpenAI? So OpenAI has been around since 2015. And OpenAI, the founders of OpenAI, they aim to develop an ethical, non-for-profit artificial general intelligence solutions. But the road to this has not been straightforward. So OpenAI founded in 2015. Elon Musk then in 2018 leaves under a little bit of a cloud. And in 2019, Microsoft invest in OpenAI. And the big question is, why would they do that? Are they trying to monopolize? Why have they bought this company? Because they buy a lot of successful large companies, bring them into the fold. By 2024, Microsoft reportedly now own 49% of OpenAI. So, since 2016, Microsoft have been committed to building Azure into an AI supercomputer for the world. So that's one of their mission statements. But then underpinning all of their efforts is Microsoft's and OpenAI's shared commitment to building AI systems and products that are trustworthy and safe, so essentially ethical AI. So if we look at this from a timelines perspective, we've got 2015, everything starts, and then 2016, OpenAI Gym is released, 2018, Elon leaves, Microsoft invests in 2019, then we get our first ChatGPT release in 2022, by 2024, Microsoft own 49%. So Microsoft essentially, their vision here is that they want to invest in a company where they can develop not just powerful AI, but ethical and responsible AI. And that suite has been growing on OpenAI side and then becoming available within the Microsoft Azure suite. So we have, when we look at the models, and this is kind of summarizing because they keep adding more in, but what we have here is the GPT, natural language models. So when we're working with, say, ChatGPT, we would work with one of the GPT models. And then if we want to work with images, we'd look at something like DALL-E. And if we want to work with audio, we'd look at something like Whisper. Text to audio, TTS, embeddings. So when we're actually embedding our data that we want to then work with our models, they have embedding models there, essentially, that you can pick up and start working with. So, ways to interact with OpenAI models. So there's lots of different ways. You can essentially use a ChatGPT interface. You can work with the APIs. You can experiment using the playgrounds. But what exactly are the competitors doing? So we've talked about OpenAI, what models we've got, what we can very top level do with it. What are the competition doing? AWS have a collaboration with Anthropic. So you see this similarity there, that Microsoft have this partnership with OpenAI, AWS have the partnership with Anthropic. And so it's that same strategy of investing in a massive or a growing AI company. Is that partnership with a big cloud provider or a big data company like Databricks have done the exact same thing, making that partnership so that they can actually then create those cutting-edge solutions. So AWS have Anthropic. GCP are a little bit different. They're a little bit more in-house. They have Gemini, which is a family of multimodal large language models developed by Google DeepMind. But they're all trying to reach that ultimate goal of being the leader and the most ethical solutions out there when it comes to your large language models, your AI. So, development tools. So we want to start picking this up. Sounds great. Sounds wonderful. We want to start creating, say, like a chatbot for your employer or for yourself. Where are the first places you would go? So we have our playgrounds, but then we also do have our SDK and REST API. Azure, Microsoft, essentially they're trying to create a solution where it's that one-stop shop for everything. So they are trying to give you, that one place you go, and it gives you everything out of the box that you need. It's your toolbox for everything AI, LLMs, all in one place. They're a little bit focused more on the Python side rather than the C#. So some of you in the audience may already be aware of this. And that's purely because Python it is the language of choice when it comes to data science and even kind of data engineering now. So they're going with what the industry is using. However, that's not to say that there isn't a lot going on when it comes to .NET and C#. So, black screen of death. Okay. Right, please say if anything is too small. Enlarge that a little bit. So, while I've opened it up here, I've gone into my browser, I've logged into Azure, I've already got myself an instance of OpenAI. I'm in the Azure AI Studio, and I can straight away come in here, I've got a model deployed, and I can essentially select from the model that I want and just literally type in here, hi. It's not going to be too creative. And it comes back and it says, how can I assist you today? And we give this in the GUI instructions as to what this AI is supposed to do. So in here, we can say what it is and what it isn't. But again, this is still in our GUI, in our UI, and we want to actually write some code. So what's nice with this, and this is the same with OpenAI, this is the Azure OpenAI, but it's the same with OpenAI as well, we can go to view code, and it gives us code snippets that we can get started with. So we can go to C# here, and it gives us code that we can actually copy and paste and start working with essentially straight away. Bear with me a second. But what if you want to work with just the REST API? So what I'm showing you here is literally where I've set up my OpenAI, Azure OpenAI instance in the background. So I have to go away and get my endpoint, and then I will get my deployment name, and then I get my secret, which is here. So I'm obviously not going to show you folks. So I have to set all of that up, but once I've done that, I can start to query, put requests to that REST API, that Azure OpenAI is giving us. So if I do a send request here, it says too many requests because I clicked it twice. But essentially, what we're doing here with this REST API, and all of you are familiar with REST APIs, right? Yeah, lots of nods. So essentially what we're doing here is we're giving it our security key, our endpoint, and in our JSON, we have our messages. So we say, your system role is, and we give it specific instructions. So this is essentially like our prompts. We're saying this is exactly what you are. So we want you to summarize the provided unstructured text in 3 easy and understandable sentences. A lot of you may have heard the phrase, like, English is the new programming language, because we're all becoming prompt engineers, right? We're all using these solutions or edging towards using these solutions. And prompt engineering is key. How we write our messages, so our system messages, and how we write our prompts asking questions. And really key is to what responses we're going to get back. So we're saying this is what you are, and I give you some information about Taylor Swift. So any Swifties here? Probably not. So as an example, I'm giving some Taylor Swift information, and I'm going to ask it to summarize this information, so that's what that system prompt is, and see what it gives me back. So we get the usual response, and we're doing a REST call, so we've got our 200. If we go down to the message, it gives me essentially that summary. And what's interesting, and we are going to go into in the session, at the bottom here, we can see things like jailbreak, self-harm, sexual violence. So this is part of our ethical and responsible AI, and what Microsoft is giving us out of the box in regards to making sure that what we are developing and the questions that are being asked are actually responsible and ethical, and it has safeguards in place. And it will actually give you data like this that you can then work with and be constantly evaluating your solutions. Right, so that was the REST API. Moving to the SDK. So imagine we've copied that bit of code out of the playground. We want to start working with it. So I'm going to initially install my packages. So I'm working with the Azure AI, OpenAI NuGet package. I'm working with an older version just because it's behaving a little bit more nicely for me. But in later versions, some of the naming of the different objects is different. Some of the functionality is slightly different. But the concept and essentially the structure of how you do this will be the same. So here's my first bit of C#. What exactly am I doing here? So I'm giving it my key, my endpoint, and my model deployment name. So again, I have set up, prior to the session, a instance of a model against my OpenAI instance in Azure, and then I get essentially, I give it a name, I can grab that name, and then along with the endpoint and the key, I can then work with the SDK and actually start playing around with that model in my C# and start to develop a viable solution. So the first thing I want to do is set up myself an OpenAI client. So that is going to enable me to actually authenticate and then actually work with my OpenAI instance. Again, I'm going to set up a system message. So that's what we saw before in the REST API. So I set up a system message, and then I set up my text to summarize. This is very simplistic, very 101. And then I can actually call my LLM endpoint. So what we are essentially doing here is we do have some settings where we're saying, right, max tokens. So we'll go into tokens after this and what exactly they are. We can say the temperature. The best way to describe temperature is how creative it is. And you can set that up and down, and it will affect the results you get back. Your nuclear slamping factor, frequency penalty, presence penalty. So there's lots of settings we can put in here, and this is obviously all type safe. We're working with the SDK to actually manipulate our calls to our model and start playing around and seeing what we can actually do with that. And once we've set all of that up, we can then do the OpenAI client that we set up in the previous cell and get chat compilations. We're doing this async. We can get our response, and then we're just saying a console write line. And that gives us the result, essentially, that we got back. So pretty straightforward, very similar to other SDKs we would have worked with. But you can see very quickly, you can set this up and start fiddling with it, playing around with it, and actually getting responses out. Okay, so that's kind of like the foundation, the basics of initially picking up OpenAI, what it is, starting to write a bit of C# code, working with the REST API, the SDK. Now I want to talk about pricing. So when people want to start picking up OpenAI, the first question they ask is, well, how much is it going to cost me? OpenAI outside of Azure have 4 different plans. So you can go with the free tier, and if you're just picking this up to get started, it's recommended you pick up the free tier just to have a play around before you start paying money. But then you can move to a plus model. So that's when you're actually starting to develop more real-world solutions. You can then upgrade to team if there's more than one of you on the project. OpenAI do often a team solution as well, a team offering. And enterprise is essentially more what is the direct competitor to what Azure are offering you with Azure OpenAI. So that is where you have more security, more essentially admin controls, reliability, and it's more aligned to be an enterprise solution. So what are tokens? So sure, some of you in the crowd have already come across this, but essentially tokens are really key when you're working with LLM models, and it's really important to talk about tokens, not just in the context of them existing within your LLMs and that's how your words are broken down, but also tokens are how the costs are very much decided, how much you actually pay when you're working with LLMs. So the GPT family process text using tokens. So they are common sequences of words. 100 tokens amount to around 75 words. So if we look at this text here, text tokenization, that is actually 3 tokens. It's not that in the background it takes each word and treats that as a word. It gets broken down. And it is put into chunks, and those chunks are then going to have numeric representations. And when we talk about vector databases in the world of LLMs and AI, this is essentially what we're talking about. We want to store the numerical values of the text so that we can then work with that when we're working with our data that we're going to be giving to our embeddings, our LLMs, and actually enriching our AI solutions. So OpenAI have their free tier for ChatGPT, so it's great for getting started. With Azure OpenAI, you need an Azure subscription, yes. So a lot of people say, well, I'm just going to compare the price of tokens between the two. It's not that simple because there's always going to be additional costs around that. Because pricing isn't just about tokens. Tokens is really key. It is like the foundation, but there's more going on than that. So if we look here, we've got our cloud provider. So essentially this could be Azure. We're working with our data, right? We're working with our customer data. That needs to be secure. We need to actually make sure that that's locked down. So we're going to have a virtual network. And then we're going to have data for embedding. So I'm talking about that vector database tokenization. We want to store our data somewhere so we can actually work with that and create our bespoke solution. So we're going to shove that in our vector database. And then we go to OpenAI, right? So great, we get our data embedded. We're then shoving it into an OpenAI model. What do we do next? Well, then we're actually going to want to have that chatbot living somewhere, or whatever the solution is you're doing with your LLM. So we're going to have an application of some sort. So that could be a web app or a mobile app. But we want to know then what people are actually doing with it. So what questions are they asking, and is it actually performing? So we would then likely want some sort of conversation history database, and in doing so, that's another additional cost. And once we have that database, we need to work with that data. So we're going to do some prompt engineering. We're going to do some ethical and responsible AI. And you can see here we'll constantly go around in this flow. So this is, when you're working with your LLMs, this is the bigger picture, the bigger consideration. It's a very simplified diagram of what you would need to think about if you're going to use and create an actual production-ready solution that 6 months down the line, for example, you can actually justify what it is doing and that it is still performing. So if we apply that to Azure, and we have our Azure Virtual Network, we could have Azure AI Document Intelligence for our data. We could have Azure Cognitive Search as our vector database, Azure OpenAI sitting in the middle, Azure App Services to actually surface this solution, and then an Azure Cosmos DB instance to actually store our conversation history. And you can see here how the costs are actually starting to increase. So that is essentially the considerations that you need to have with costs, very top level, but just bear that in mind if you want it to be a successful data solution, and most AI data projects actually fail. If you look at the statistics out there, these are the bigger considerations, and this is one of the big reasons why they do fail, is just not having that infrastructure going on, that accountability and understanding and reliability of your solution. So next we're going to move to security. Will they use my data? So trained data for fine-tuning models. Azure OpenAI is only used for customer models. OpenAI prior to March 2023, it wasn't actually guaranteed. So historically, and depending on how you've got your system set up, in OpenAI instance, you want to make sure that your data is actually only being used for yourself and for your customer. Prompt and compilations for GPT. So Azure OpenAI will store it for a maximum of 30 days. And then OpenAI will store some prompts for training and retraining and improving models. So look at some micro documentation here. Your prompts, inputs, compilation, outputs, your embeddings, and your training are not. And there's a big list there of things that's not going to happen with your data. But then on the OpenAI side, they do say that they may use your data to train their models. You can opt out of that, but it's something that needs to be borne in mind. Again, enterprise, as you mentioned before, that is more the like for Azure. So security and networks, our Azure virtual network, we are essentially going to be looking at having our web app with private endpoints, working with Azure OpenAI, working with Azure Cognitive Search as our vector database. So again, this infrastructure needs to be taken into consideration. So you've all heard of SLAs, right? Lots of nods. So our SLAs, our service level agreements, Azure OpenAI just give you more guarantees because it is within the ecosystem of its AI offerings. And OpenAI, and I do keep checking this, are working on it, but they don't offer the same. So just another thing bearing in mind, but SLAs are really key with your solutions as well. So, and we are going to dig into some code again in a second. Responsible AI. Who is responsible? Air Canada ordered to pay customer who was misled by airline chatbot. So they tried to blame the chatbot itself, and obviously they were ultimately responsible. This falls into that responsible AI and understanding your solutions. Microsoft's approach to ethical AI. In July 2023, Microsoft, Anthropic, and Google and OpenAI launched a Frontier Model Forum, an industry body focused on ensuring safe and responsible development. So essentially, Microsoft have these principles and approach that we keep touching on when it comes to responsible and ethical AI, and the offerings that they're giving us essentially give us that security and give us things not quite out of the box, but things that we can easily plug into and work with. So Microsoft's approach to ethical AI, they have 6 key principles: fairness, reliability and safety, privacy and security, inclusivity, transparency, accountability. So AI systems should treat people all fairly, AI systems should perform reliably, AI systems should be secure and respect privacy, AI systems should empower everyone to be engaging, AI systems should be understandable, people should be accountable for AI systems. So, demo, content safety API. This is what we're here to see. I'm going to zoom that in again. Please say if it's too small. Right, so Microsoft offer the Content Safety API. What does that mean? What does that give us? So those 6 principles that they have, This is one of their solutions that they offer that we can work with in C# and .NET and actually analyze our data and see whether what we're giving it is actually responsible and ethical. So what I have here, I've got my C# file. I'm doing very similar to what I did before. I'm going away to essentially an endpoint, but this is an instance of their content safety solution. So I've gone into Azure, I spun up an instance, I've got my endpoint, I've grabbed my key. I can then, working with this SDK, I can now communicate with that, create myself another client like we did with the OpenAI client. I'm creating a content safety client. And then I've put the text in there, how do you make a bomb? Obviously, that is not an ethical thing to say. So if I come in here, and not, right, do .NET run. Right, so that's gone away, working with that SDK. So our content safety SDK, pointing to our solution in Azure, and analyze that sample piece of text that I've given it. And it's actually giving me 4 outputs there. So hate severity, self-harm severity, sexual severity, violence severity, and it's giving me the violence severity of 4. So we can work with this API along with our open API to analyze and create that architecture we saw before, where we're able to make sure that we have responsible and ethical AI. So it's not quite as glued together as when you're working with some of the Python solutions that you get when wanting to work with things like ethical, responsible AI, working directly with your OpenAI. But the solutions are there, and you can plug into these SDKs, REST APIs, and actually create your solution. And not only create yourself a really good chatbot, but create one that you have faith and confidence in, and that you're storing all of that historic data. Okay. Check time. Right. So embeddings and RAG. So I'm sure many of you have heard of this already. I can't see because my glasses are like reading glasses. Embeddings and RAG, so retrieval augmented generation. So this is where we're looking at that very basic diagram earlier on, where we want to actually we want to embed it with our own data. So we've got our question, we're retrieving our data, we're giving it, enriching that our prompt with that, and then we give it to our LLM, and then we get an answer. And when we're working with our embeddings, so that's where we created our vectors database. Essentially, our embeddings, when we have that sitting in our database, and when we're working with our embedding models and our LLM, it's looking for relationships between words. So not necessarily the obvious relationships. It's actually creating what essentially is most commonly called the k-nearest neighbour, and the best way this has been described to me is when you have a whole load of tea bags that are labelled with different flavours, you chuck them down on the table, and then you chuck one in the middle that doesn't have a label, and you say, for example, based on the nearest one, what flavour is this particular tea? And then you say, right, based on the nearest 10, what flavour is this particular tea? And it's creating that relationship of what we call k-nearest neighbour to actually decide what is going to be the next token, or what's going to be the next word. So retrieval augmentation generation, why? We want to essentially work with our own data. We want to be able to keep it up to date, and you want to be able to customize your systems with your own knowledge base. And just digging into this a little bit more, we essentially have a very basic architecture here where it's saying what is good food for my cat. We can push that into our architecture, push that into our LLM, our data source, our database, and it will go away and try and find those relationships, work with the LLM, and give you the most accurate answer. So for example here, if we put in the word cat, that would be related to words such as feline and tabby. So in RAG, essentially, we're putting our vector database in there in the blue, putting that into our architecture, working with our embeddings, and this is essentially the solution we're trying to come up with so that we can work with our own data and actually have accuracy and have our data in a format that the LLM can work with. So, one of Microsoft's out-of-the-box solutions for this is actually Microsoft PromptFlow. And for those that have already heard of this, it is Python, but they are working on a .NET solution. But what that does is it gives you a nice visual interface where you can create flows, build out your RAG architecture, and then glue it all together and create a nice, easy to spin up RAG solution to the problem you're trying to solve. So I'm aware of the time. I'm going to just... So very briefly here, this is an example of PromptFlow, which again they are working on a .NET solution where it's a nice little GUI. We work with YAML files and we can glue it all together and actually create that RAG architecture really quickly. Okay, but for us and what we want to do, that isn't very useful. We're not writing Python. So now we're going to talk about Microsoft Semantic Kernel, and we will go into some demos of this as well. So Semantic Kernel is essentially an open source framework that integrates with your LLMs like GPT-4 and allows you to work with languages such as C# and Python. It has a very abstracted architecture, so it's essentially like other architectures you may have worked with. It's actually creating that layer of separation so you can have your solution on one side, your LLM on the other, and it gives you things like plugins and planner and memories that you can then work with to actually enhance your solution and work more towards that RAG architecture. So again, we have plugins, memory, and planner. Plugins are essentially task-specific extensions. They're modular, they are reusable, so work really nicely with your C# programming, your code, and your standards. And they are context-aware and extensible. So memory, that is context, retention, and retrieval. It's personalization, and it is flexible and scalable. And we're working with the planner as part of Semantic Kernel. It's dynamic task management, context-aware and adaptive, and integration with plugins. So your planner helps to essentially plan the order of the tasks, the order of things that are going to happen. Right, so this solution here has come directly from some Microsoft examples, and that's not because I am lazy and I didn't want to put an example together myself. It is because this is a great place for you to start if you were to start to pick this up. There's lots of examples there with OpenAI, Azure OpenAI, working with this semantic kernel. So by looking at this now, you can go away, look at the same solutions, and start achieving the same things, if not more likely more. So, let me close this down. Go to this one here. So we can see here I'm actually using the semantic kernel. I'm doing very similar to what I did before. I'm going away and getting my endpoint and my OpenAI key. But this time I actually go away and create myself what we call a kernel. So that is our semantic kernel, and that's what we're going to be using as that layer in between ourselves and our OpenAI instance. And then what we're going to do is develop ourselves a prompt. So write exactly what we want in there. Is that 10 minutes? Okay, so we can essentially write a prompt the same as we did when working directly with OpenAI, but this time we're actually working with our semantic kernel as an in-between layer. And I'm going to pray to the demo gods and hit run. Hold on. Okay, so we've done very similar to what we did before, but we're working again with the semantic kernel. So we are getting our response back, we've given it a prompt, we've given it information as to what it is, and we get a nice response back. But how is that different to what we did before? Well, I'm going to essentially comment this out. And then I'm going to work with my enhanced prompt demo. Do this here. I'm going to run the exact same command again. So what exactly have we done here? I've called this class object that I created enhanced prompt demo. It's coming back with some additional information. What we are actually doing here is actually working with our chat history and building on that, and then we are able to more intelligently work with our LLM, our solution. We're working with that memory so that we can actually build all of this out. So I've got my chat history here. I create an object of chat history. Doing our semantic kernel chat message context. And then what we are ultimately doing is we add our message to our chat history. So as we keep asking questions, that is all getting stored, and we were able to work with that again more intelligently. And this is an example where we can actually work with that memory as part of the semantic kernel. So then when I actually run this, I can go away and get the last question that was asked. This is just an example here. It will come back, return me the last the last prompt it was given, and it's storing all of that, building on it. And this is a very simplistic 101 example, but this is where we've got that layer in between OpenAI, and we can actually work towards creating our RAG solution by working with the semantic kernel. And I didn't want to go into too much depth with this because it's kind of a subject in itself, but this is our framework, our layer that we can work with as C#.NET developers to be able to create those viable and reliable solutions. Okay, so LLMOps. Everyone's familiar with this, right? The magical figure of 8. Take that as a yes. So when we're working with data and ML models, we have a similar concept, but it gets a little bit more complicated. So when we're working with LLMOps, we have to break it out into more components. So when we're exploring, we've got our hypothesis, we have to try our prompts, find LLMs, and then we can actually then advance to building, augmentation, where we're doing RAG, prompt engineering, evaluation, exception handling, prepare for deployment. So we want to do our quota and cost management, monitoring, safe roll out staging, content filtering, deploy LLM, our LLM API. But then we send our feedbacks when we were talking about having that database before with all of our questions. This is a little bit more complex than that. We're sending our feedback, and then we go around in that circle again. So it's like the magical figure of 8, but because data is constantly changing, we've got more components going on. And so when we're working with our LLMs and developing these solutions, LLMOps is really key for successful data projects. And again, most ML projects fail, which is why I have this as part of the presentation, just to really push the importance of that and understanding the bigger picture of what is involved when you're going to start picking up OpenAI or other equivalent solutions. So, finally, I know I've just thrown a lot of information at you and talked very fast. But there is just some of the core concepts to take into consideration when you're going to start working with OpenAI. So you can really easily pick up the REST API. You can really easily pick up the SDK and start developing. But if you've got the bigger picture in your mind as to what you want to produce professionally for your employer and how you would need to implement things like your LLMOps, your ethical responsible AI, and the fact that there are those APIs, those SDKs out there that you can plug in fairly easily, you're more likely to see success at the end. So learning resources, highly recommend Microsoft Learn. The AI show with Microsoft, this isn't a Microsoft pitch, but we are talking about Azure Microsoft AI. So the AI show, GitHub examples that Microsoft Azure offer are really, really good. And then OpenAI themselves have the OpenAI cookbook. So there's lots of resources out there, lots of information out there, but those are some of the key ones that will help you get started. So, summary. If you're going to start picking up OpenAI, you are a beginner, evaluate your business requirements. Do you have SLAs you need to meet? Because with OpenAI, you could just go with the free tier if you're doing it for yourself or you're just getting started. Going with the free tier is the best way to go, just to start getting used to it. And then as you become more competent, it becomes more of a professional solution that you're trying to create. You can then move into Azure or other OpenAI offerings. What customer support do you require? Because obviously with Azure, you get the wider customer support there because you've got the massive monolithic cloud provider there with everything it offers around all of its services. How are you going to store your data? How are you going to secure your data? How will it be integrated with your existing systems? How easily can you perform LLMOps? So how easily can you say you can really say that you understand what it is doing 6 months down the line? You understand, it's ethical, it's responsible, and you have that accountability and explainability. So again, you need to consider responsible ethical AI. How does it perform? How can you test it? And again, most AI projects fail to make it to production, so make sure you use the tools that will empower you to succeed. So I could have spent 50 minutes just giving you lots of C# examples, but the point of this session is it's a beginner's introduction, and it gives you some C# examples and tools that you can use, but also helps kind of give you that bigger picture of the architecture to actually create a viable solution. Okay.